Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am authorized to assure you that so far there is no reasonable cause for alarm. The rumors of invading armies and mass destruction are based on hysteria and are absolutely false. I repeat, these rumors are absolutely false.
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of K. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name is Coleman.
And my name is Mitchell, and tonight we have a, shall we say, mega episode prepared for you tonight.
A Megamorph episode.
Exactly, yes, because we are covering Megamorphs number 3, Elfangor's Secret. Boy, what a book.
I mean, every single one of these Megamorphs books is exciting, but I can say that I've been waiting to get to this one.
Yeah, this is one that I've actually only read once, and the first time I read it, I was completely confused by its very abruptly different, shall we say, initial chapter or two. And at that point, I'd also never read the book where the Droid was introduced, so he was a very, very randomly appearing character. And
that was the same for me.
I had a hard time getting into it the first time. Second time around, I could say I've got a much more favorable opinion of this book.
But I will tell you, dear listener, that there are twists and turns to this episode that you will not see coming, just like the book itself.
Wow. Well said. Yes. Traditionally, we talk a little bit about the cover, and we read the back of the book, and then we just kind of jump into it. This being a special episode, and boy, we're looking to push the boundaries here of our record time to, that hour and a half, 2 hour, maybe more. We'll just see how the conversation develops as we go.
Don't make promises. We'll get to the first hour and be like, that's the end of the book.
Yeah, we're done talking about this one, as it turns out. We wanted to wrap after 45 minutes. No, speaking of that, we actually planned on having a third host to join us for this particular recording and review.
As we are wont to do on Megamorphs episodes before. Exactly.
So, kind of tragically, I guess, this will be our first mega episode without a third personality joining us. And I got to say, I think it'll be all right. We've managed a couple episodes, you and I, before.
We have. We did have somebody lined up, but there were audio difficulties with the first time we started, and then scheduling just it nipped us. There was nothing we could do. But I just want you to envision that you've never heard us before and don't know anything about us, even though we talk way too often about personal things on the podcast. And just think of us as guest hosts for this episode.
Exactly. Yes. This is this is a very huge time travel heavy book. And if you've learned anything about either of us, it's that one of our favorite, if not absolute favorite sci-fi trope is time travel. For me especially. I mean, I've got it literally tattooed on my body, my love for it. And we can talk for quite extensively about the subject of time travel.
And we will.
Exactly. First, though, I think we're well overdue for a good old-fashioned dip in the pool of fandom and love that we receive from all you guys. And let's just read some emails and some comments, huh? How about that?
Let's get started. You have a Facebook message first?
You want to? Okay, yeah. Let's start out with a Facebook message. Absolutely. This Facebook message comes from Zach Hurdle. And he, I'm just going to read it for you. He said, "So, love the sickness episode, and it reminded me of something I used to ponder. When a Yeerk controls a morph-capable body, they kind of get absorbed into the body or whatever. Like they can morph a fly and not have the Yeerk stay the same size and blow up the host's head or something. So, we saw something similar to that in the shark book, where they were morphing sharks and they got the brain implants and then they couldn't demorph because they'd get blown up or whatever. He goes on to say, so then you could be a Yeerk and take a morph-capable host and use that morph use that to morph a Yeerk, take another morph-capable host, and continue this process infinitely, you could absolutely eliminate entire races of beings that way.
Yeah.
I thought that was a kind of an interesting take on the theory of that. So you could have a Yeerk inside a morph-capable body like Visor 3 does. What if he morphed into a Yeerk's body and then took over, like, say, one of the Animorphs? All I know is that he would get screwed over majorly on the time limits.
I think it's cool, the idea of, like, one person wiping out an entire race just by morphing. But at the same time, I think it would both drive the original person insane.
Sure.
For various reasons. And I think also, that you'd be a Nothlet before you got through, 1/16,000th of the population.
But if, like, 3 out of 2 of those bodies were already morph capable, it begs a good question. Can you get trapped as a Nothlet in a morph capable body?
Yeah, I think that's a hard rule.
Like if you were to morph into something that already had the morphing technology, I don't know.
Either way, I don't think you'd ever be able to go back. See, I think your first body would be caught after 2 hours, and then so you could never get back to that point. And then another body would be caught after 2 hours, and then you'd never be able to get back to that point. Your Nothletness would be catching up with your new morphing abilities. Not to mention, I'd say this is impossible because after the first 6 or 7 morphs, you would be exhausted.
Sure, because it's physically taxing to do this.
Yeah. So, and we've seen that transfers over. Even though somebody morphs into a new body, they're still exhausted in that new body after morphing. So
it's an interesting idea, but not on the whole realistic. However, I think, with a little tweaking, a little master writing, a little morph lore expansion, you could do something really cool with that idea. And that's something that, boy, I sure would love to see in a future book.
Throw in a couple Sario rips and it's very attainable.
Absolutely. Now, I want to hear some emails from you, my good sir.
Oh. I've got them ready to go. Our first one comes from James Hilton. And he says, "Hey guys, according to Seropedia, Katherine and Michael were not the ones who wanted to push for a harder vegetarian story in the experiment. Here's a quote from her about the ending. I took some grief from this. I took some grief for this from the fans. A fair number were upset that I ended up with all of the Animorphs ordering hamburgers. I am in favor of being as humane as possible in dealing with livestock, but I'm not a vegetarian. I kind of think that I'll start worrying about the treatment of cows more once there are no more political prisoners, no more children dying of curable diseases, and no more fanatics blowing themselves up to murder citizens." That's straight from K. Applegate.
Okay,
that's pretty hardcore.
Terrific quote. First of all, even though it proves me wrong, because I think I was the one that said that garbage. So, terrific. Yeah, cool. I don't know. I don't got much more on that.
He finishes the email by saying, "I can't remember where I saw it, but I know there was an interview or forum comment somewhere that Katherine had made saying that it was actually the ghostwriter who was pushing the hard vegetarian story. She and Michael then had to go in and tone it down and add in the Cassie eats a burger scene at the end."
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's actually way more interesting than what I said.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Absolutely, yeah.
I have another email.
I like the way that played out. Cool.
Yeah, I have another email here from Jigs Cabiles.
Nice.
Not sure if I said that right.
Good, strong Dutch?
Hi, Coleman and Mitch. I'm loving your podcast. I've been a long-time listener since episode 6, I believe, but have now only decided to shoot you an email. It's good to see you guys getting back on track after a really long dry spell. I'm loving the return of the tangents, which I think is one of the best aspects of your show.
Oh, yeah.
While there are 2 other Animorph podcasts I listen to, both of which I strongly recommend if you have time, your ideas on the might-haves and what-ifs of the series are what bring me back to the show. Coleman's Jake Tobias ship notwithstanding.
Not a fan, huh?
I guess. On the experiment, I vaguely remember reading a very similar Animorphs book in the past where the plot instead centers around experiments on Hork-Bajir. I've always thought it was in this one. This just goes to show how much Book 28 is very quickly discounted as a filler book. Needless to say, after your review and rereading it, I completely agree that this is one of the better books in the series and really does deserve a 5 out of 5. While it does not advance the overall plot, the character moments we get in this book are on par with Book 16, The Warning, a favorite of mine, which carries a really strong morality message underneath the vegetarian, animal testing, internet is bad PSA that are marketed in both books. I hope to hear from you guys more often and would like to let you know that there are people still anxiously awaiting the new episodes, and really, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts when you get to the end of the series. Congratulations on the new baby, Mitch, and wishing you both a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Cheers from the Philippines.
Oh, I was off by just a little bit.
Yeah, but his real name is not Jigs Cabiles. His real name is Jake.
Oh, my name is Jake. No, that was an excellent email. I love that. A lot of good discussion. Thank you for the personal wishes.
Yeah, a lot of nice things said about us. And to be fair, Jake, that is not me shipping Tobias and Jake. That is the authors of the series, in my personal opinion. So.
Yeah, in your opinion, which makes it then your thought.
From my perspective, the Jedi are evil.
Right. Okay, so that's the end of your emails?
That's all I got.
Sweet. There's just a couple of posts on the Reddit page that I thought were worth reading because they're kind of fun. First up, we got followed by tidal waves. Followed by tidal waves. You might want to get that checked out. I don't know who checks that out, like a shaman or something.
I would say a psychologist.
I would bet on shaman. And he or she says, "Thank you," in all caps. I've been listening to the podcast the past month or two and have been dreading catching up because I can't binge anymore. I had 3 episodes left before this morning and now I have 4. Keep them coming. How many do you have now? Followed by tidal waves. We'd really like to know. It's awesome. It's awesome to know that people are just joining the show, actually, within the most recently, like a couple of months. So cool that we're just starting to pick up steam, it feels like, right?
It's like every time we have a dry spell and come back, people think it's a brand new podcast and we get more listeners.
That might be the case. I don't know. Maybe it's working out in our advantage. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been kind of dreading the thought of the end, even though as much as everybody says they want to hear our thoughts on, the end of the series, some of the best books in the series.
Which book is that? The end? Is that like number 23 or?
there is no the end, unfortunately.
I know.
Until our Megamorphs number 5.
Oh yeah.
Well, we'll save that discussion for later, if ever. I've got more. Howie Snake says, as instructed by the duo of Thoughtspeak, that's us, I'm now active on Reddit. Fantastic review as always. This book's ending surgery scene is so vivid in my mind even now. It was a really good surgery scene, I will say.
Yeah.
It was a shocking read as a kid, and it still grips me rereading it. I've read the whole series many times over. I feel like aside from the fandom fluke... I feel like aside from the random fluke, and then in parentheses he says, Australia and a few others, Coleman and Mitchell will enjoy many of the ghostwritten titles. Now, I know the Australia book gets crapped on a lot.
Cassie goes to Australia.
And I can't wait to read it, honestly.
I've never read it. I know the Atlantis book gets really crapped on, but I refuse to believe a book where the Animorphs go to Atlantis as killer whales will not hold my interest in every single page.
And, okay, having personally been to Australia myself...
personally been to Atlantis.
Don't try and hop in on my fame here. Cassie's solo books are always so interesting, right? Everybody loves Cassie Solo. It worked in The Departure. It worked in The Sickness. Why wouldn't it work in The Australia?
Yeah, it worked in the Skunk book.
She was very much with the group. The group brings Cassie down.
Oh, she was in the forest all the time by herself.
Feeding skunk babies or whatever.
When did you go to Australia?
I went to Australia. I can't honestly recall what year it was, but I know that it took place during the transitionary summer year between when I went from 8th grade to 9th grade. So what age would that be, like 13, 14, something like that?
Congrats on surviving their wildlife.
Oh, yeah, it was terrific.
And I guess congrats to Cassie as well. I assume she lives after that book.
I don't know. I don't know what goes down in that book other than everyone straight up hates it. So we'll see. I've just got a few more here. A Reddit poster named Merkin. It's a goofy name. Says, haven't finished the episode yet, but just wanted to say, getting in my car hungover this morning and seeing that there was a new episode of my favorite podcast reviewing one of my favorite books of the series was awesome. Starting 2017 off right. Been looking forward to this one for a while. Can't wait for book 33, which we're not getting into.
Which we're not talking about this episode.
But that's great, Merkin. I want to hear the story of why you're getting in your car hungover. I think it'd be an interesting episode of the sharing.
Going to work. It's probably going to work after the weekend. That's not that crazy.
No, I'm imagining the sharing is having a crazy New Year's bash where their goal is to get as many people drunk as possible and then infest them all with yerks.
He barely made it out. Just left with a hangover and no yerk.
He was the one that managed to drink so much but not quite pass out until right after midnight when everyone else had.
He was infested, but he drank so much he gave his yerk alcohol poisoning and got out of there alive.
Is that how it works?
Yep.
I don't think.
Alcohol goes in your bloodstream, which goes straight to the brain.
No, I think I remember in Visor. Didn't she say something about her using drugs in her host body? She talked about having sex in her host body a lot, and
yeah,
I think she mentioned drugs.
I think she did heroin or cocaine to keep her host body happy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
again,
pretty awesome.
Kid series.
The last one I want to read is from iJest. And he says, I've noticed that since the ghostwriting started, the inside covers have made a pretty big jump from being random nature shots to legitimate scenes from the book, which is, I think, very true. And this Megamorphs one kind of, sort of.
Yeah, no. We'll get to that soon.
Okay, this one's not the best example.
This isn't ghostwritten, though, so maybe the ghostwriters are the only ones who cared about the inside cover.
That could be it. I don't know if they had any input, though. But for the most part, yeah, I think that's kind of true. I really like the ending with turning Aftran into a Nothlet, but to be honest, I kind of wish Cassie became a controller for the rest of the series. It would have been really cool if they had talked about how the Yerk pool feedings work and managed to have Tidwell hack into the data files and give Aftran a new identity so that she could just chill in Cassie's head, go on missions, and basically become another Animorph. In every 3 days, she could go to the pool without getting killed. Now, I really, really like that idea. And
yeah, I read that idea and thought it would have fit really well into the series. And it would have actually helped with some of the end of the series stuff where they stopped trusting Cassie. That would have been really interesting about them being worried about Cassie's Yerk going back to the Yerks and whether they can trust her or not.
Oh, sure, yeah. They could be wondering the whole time if she's, being a double agent, and she wouldn't even know.
It would have added a really, really cool dynamic to the series. And I think they even maybe could have pulled off Aftran having morphing ability and being an Animorph but staying a Yerk.
Yeah, that'd have been kind of cool as well. Maybe she just hangs out in Cassie's head for a little while until there's a book where, they finally learn to trust her, and then they give Aftran the Yerk, the morphing technology.
Oh my gosh, I got it. This is how you would do it. So they don't trust Aftran, but Cassie does. And Aftran can't go back to the Yerk pool. She's not trusted, whatever. Cassie keeps her in her head. They find a way, like a small Kandrona ray or something, to keep her alive. And it's like Cassie's secret. She doesn't tell anybody that she's keeping Aftran alive in her head and being a controller. And then they get into a battle during a mission, and everybody's wiped out. Jake's his intestines are on the floor, can't move, everybody's knocked out. Cassie's dying, and Aftran crawls out of her head, morphs into something, and saves them all. And then they start trusting Aftran. Boom.
Okay, yeah.
That'd be amazing.
That does sound very, very Applegate-ish, I will say.
I want that series.
I think that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The last part of his comment here, unfortunately, says, also, I forgot to mention in the comments of the last podcast, I'm Team Coleman. I think Animorphs should be live action. Boo. Seeing the animals fight would be so much cooler live action. What was wrong with you? And
Sorry,
also,
I'm just not ready to give up the fight.
And also, I don't think a cartoon could properly convey the darkness of war and killing and the morality of the choices the Animorphs had to make, where it's such a big deal in the books. And all I have to say to that is Avatar, The Last Airbender. Mic drop, boom.
look, just because its live action adaptation went horribly wrong. That had to do with the writing and the actors. It had nothing to do with the fact of whether it's live action or animation. And you could make a strong argument that as much as I love Avatar: The Last Airbender, it is a comedy series with serious moments, not a serious series with comedic moments, which is what Animorphs needs to be.
Sure.
Boom.
I mean, everybody's
I'd drop my mic if it wasn't on an arm.
It seems everybody's got their opinions, one way or the other, whether you favor live action or you favor animation. I think there's some blend, some happy medium that would please all the fans.
I would say in all these arguments I've heard of people chiming in on this, the majority of the animation arguments are talking about why something can't be done, why it would be harder for it to be live action, and so they should do it animation. I say the easy way isn't always the best, and if something's hard, you figure out how to do it. That's filmmaking. That's how they've done it for 80 years, and we could figure out how to do it and do it at a high level.
If that tiger doesn't want to tackle that, man in the 8-foot-tall Hork-Bajir suit, you just make that tiger attack him. You put a slab of meat on him.
We're at the point now where you can look at Dawn of the Planet of the Apes or Life of Pi. We can do incredibly realistic animals, photorealistic animals, and you could do them amazingly in Animorphs, because Animorphs, you don't need action beat after action beat of CGI animals fighting aliens. There's so much human drama there that the majority of the movie... It'd be like Jurassic Park. The majority of the movie is drama and human interaction and suspense. And then when you have those big fights, your CGI budget and time is dedicated to making those look as realistic as possible. So you could really sell it with sparse use and incredibly realistic use.
Sure.
That's how you do it.
I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying what I want to see is animation, because I think that's what would appeal most to me and how it could be best done. Okay.
I think the best thing to happen in recent years that gave me more excitement for seeing like an Animorphs on screen is seeing the new Spider-Man in the trailer for that. How they actually have a young kid, at least young enough to sell even younger, playing a high school student. So you could actually have a really great actor who looks young enough that he's not like, a 30-year-old playing Jake. You could have someone young enough that looks like a 13-year-old starting out in the first movie or, episode, whatever. And you could actually have these young kids dealing with this, and it could be live action. It'd be amazing.
Sure. I mean, this is honestly a debate that we could do an entire episode on. Like an entire hour and a half debate. Call it
Megamorphs
the
3
debate.
is the place to start this up.
This is a forum, but this is clearly not the place or time for this debate.
Yeah.
And with that being the end of our emails, I think it's best that we move on and actually get into the book now, because there's a lot to talk about with this damn thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Not least of all which is the cover.
Yeah, the cover. We'll start out. I know there's some international differences with this book cover. The one I've got is
barely
straight American. Yeah, and this is I would say one of the not great.
It's pretty bland in that it looks
shiny.
like it's...
Mine's reflective.
It's very shiny, but it seems like it's unnecessarily shiny. Like, I don't want to look at my cover and then have it catch the light wrong and blind me. And it looks like all the kids themselves are like just stock photo extra images they took of the character model kids that like weren't good enough for the other books in the main series.
Yeah, there's two things about this. A, I think Axe is way too small.
Exactly, and Axe, yeah, he it's the same stock picture, by the way, of Axe that they've always used.
Yeah, and then Marco looks like a middle school drug dealer.
Marco, you mean Tobias?
Marco, Tobias.
Yeah, Tobias.
Well,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Tobias is Hispanic on this cover for some reason. And then just they're all crouched, and I don't know why. And it would almost work, like Marco, Rachel, and Jake, like being in a weird crouch. But then there's Cassie, who looks like
I know she's ready for action.
She looks like she was just surprised and peed herself.
Her spidey senses are tingling.
Yeah, and then I guess going back to Jake.
No, you know what? Honestly, here's what it looks like,
crouch.
man. Jake looks like he's got his hand on Cassie's ass, and she's like surprised by it. Like this is the moment when they took the picture is when Jake like grabbed her ass.
No. What this looks like is that this is right before all the kids thought they were going to take the picture, and so Jake was like nobly going down on one knee so Cassie could sit on his knee comfortably, and she's mid sitting down onto his knee.
Okay. Well, either way, and then like it's whose eyes are these meant to be looking at the kids in the background?
They
because
have
that's
to be Elfangor. They have to be.
Yeah. Well, that's the assumption, but. Okay, yeah, I guess Elfangor... I had to just ask myself, did Elfangor have eyebrows? And then, like, I looked at Axe and I was like, oh my god, yeah. Like,
he had awkward human eyebrows.
it's very bizarre.
And cat eyes. I don't know when they added the cat eyes to the Andalite race, but they have them.
I don't know. So, yeah, that's who we assume is that. The inside cover that we hinted at here is just bizarre, really. I mean, it's got the full team in it, in Battle Morphs. And they're all just kind of chilling out on the battlefield as there's like explosions and jets and blimps going by in the background.
Yeah, they decided that hey, we're gonna take a selfie here real quick, put on a timer, and right in the middle of World War II. Just you can argue that a lot of the inside covers have gotten more apt to a scene in the book or closer to a scene in the book, and this is not one of them. Just because they were in World War II doesn't mean they all stood around or even went into these morphs during World War II.
Right, and Jake wasn't there.
Yeah.
And another thing that really irks me, though, is that if you're holding the book as such and you flip the front cover open to look at the inside cover, Axe is standing in the exact same position, place, because they use the same art of him every single damn time. Yeah.
No, what irks me is that even though they have pictures, all of these are not drawn. They look like they're photos of animals. And for some reason, they cannot get a hawk that looks like it's actually flying or looks realistic in any way.
They don't know what a hawk in flight really looks like.
Like they actually had to photo manipulate this hawk to make it in this form. It's crazy. I don't get it.
It looks like they took a toy of a hawk and like strung it up on the ceiling and then sketched it like that.
Yeah, or like a bad stuffed hawk or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, yeah. So that's enough of that.
I'm gonna read the back now.
You're gonna read. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. We found out who Visor 4 is, and he has found the Time Matrix. The machine Elfangor had hidden in the abandoned construction site. The same place we met him on the night none of us will ever forget. Especially me, whoever that is. Now Visor 4 has the Matrix, and he plans to use it to become Visor 1. But Jake, Rachel, Cassie, Marco, Axe, and I, Tobias, I guess, can't let that happen. We can't let him alter time so that the Yeerks will win this invasion. So we're prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. And ultimately, one of us will lose this fight.
Okay, couple points. There's just so much stupid. I mean, with the guy's plot and everything, if they wanted to alter the time so that Yeerks will win the invasion, I could name a couple of things to do that have been smarter.
Well, I mean, he had a very broad idea of what would really mess with the Earth, and we got to think that this is from a Yeerk perspective on how he wanted the Earth to be after he was done. So maybe it made the most sense to him in a way that we don't realize because he's a Yeerk and he's seen other species and how other cultures developed. I don't know.
And because his host body was driving him crazy the whole time.
Oh, we'll get to that. Yeah, that's definitely one reason.
That's cool stuff. So, holy crap. Yeah, let's dive into it. Right? Ready? You ready to dive?
Let's go.
We don't have transitionary music anymore. So it's just like anticlimactically, and we're in. They wrote this thing themselves, so on that inside page, it just says for Michael and Drake again. And the author doesn't want to thank anybody. And, this book starts out with a little bit of a prologue, And all it basically does is set up how Elfangor had kind of hidden the time matrix, near the construction site. And it's just some parts of it are kind of worded very strangely.
I don't know why we discussed this before the episode. I don't understand why you don't get this. He didn't bury it near the construction site. He buried it in the woods in the 60s, and then that land was eventually developed and became the mall and the construction site.
Okay, yes, that's what makes sense to me. The part where he's tooling around using human construction equipment to bury the thing is what confused me.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say construction equipment. I think he literally used a shovel and buried it.
Using only the equipment available to any human, he dug a hole and rolled the device into it, and then he covered it.
Yeah, I don't know why they ordered it so weird, but I seriously doubt he was out there with a caterpillar.
That's what I want to imagine, damn it. It's Andalite Elfangor driving a caterpillar.
Yeah, because he said this is before he morphed human. So I think
with his rear end hanging out.
I had a weird theory about like Andalites, because the time matrix is this legendary object. Like he wanted to use his own Andalite hands to bury it. I think that still holds up. I don't know. Is my guess, because it says he morphs human after he buries it. So whatever, not important. But
what is important though is that the book, right from the first chapter, things are different and in a very bizarre way, because this one starts out with Tobias, who's flying around, doing Tobias things, or so you think. Until he starts talking about like what he's seeing around the world.
What he starts talking about is his date later with Melissa, and how it's weird because it sets up Melissa first, and you're like, wait, Melissa isn't a regular. What happened? She's not back. What's going on?
Yeah, and Melissa isn't an Animorph.
Yeah, you think you like missed a book or something, and you're reading that, and it's weird. And then it's even stranger the way he talks about her, like how. Yeah, it's nice when I'm on a date with Melissa and blah, 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 but I'm not happy. And then he talks about flying is the only thing that keeps him happy. It's like, oh, that's weird. I've missed a lot. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then he talks about the slaves down on the beach, how everybody has personal slaves. And you know that you're in for some wonky times.
Exactly.
Animorph High.
Right off the bat, they're seeming to imply here that America's now this like slave-owning fascist kind of empire. And it's this like alternate world where, of course, he's in love with Melissa, the Animorph that has somehow taken the place of Rachel.
Yeah.
And then we get the next chapter from Jake's perspective, which is really cool, because this version of Jake is such a different guy. First of all, he's supreme leader Jake, and he's just a complete dickhole who thinks of Cassie as an expendable part of his team here.
Yeah, our mild-mannered, doesn't want to be a leader Jake is now a little, tiny little dictator who's ready to sell off his friends if it didn't hurt him in some way. So definitely a lot different going on here. Although I love the little part where he says that when Cassie says something a little extreme, he exchanges a glance with Marco, and Marco makes like an "I told you so" kind of mouth movement, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Marco's super racist too, which is weird because we find out we kind of confirm in this book his father is Jewish. I don't know, maybe it said that before in the series. But if his father's Jewish, it stands to reason that maybe he is also Jewish. And
yes, that is how genealogy works.
In this, I'd like to think that everybody chooses for themselves at the appropriate age, Coleman, and some people aren't indoctrinated into it. Okay,
it's not talking about Jewish the religion. It's talking about Jewish the nation they were born in. That's what people talk. A lot of the
there's a lot of subtle hints that they're a Jewish family.
Yes, this is something that irks me in real life. No matter what you believe in, people from Israel are Jews. They're Hebrews. That's just what they are. That's in the Holocaust. There were plenty of Jews who were taken to concentration camps who weren't religious. It had nothing to do with their religion. It had to do with their people and their culture and where they were from.
Okay. So what's Marco then, Mr. Know-It-All?
Jewish Hispanic guy.
A Jewish Hispanic guy. Okay. Yes, because his mom's Hispanic, right?
Yeah. No, his dad's... I thought his dad was Hispanic.
No,
his mom's Hispanic. Never mind.
Okay, glad we nailed this down. What the hell were we talking about? Oh yeah, they're all racist, and it's really cool to see actually how Cassie is like the extreme opposite of the Cassie we know as well, right?
Well, there's still hints of her in there. She's the most compassionate of them still. But still owns a slave.
Yeah, exactly. And I just feel like the way she talks about things being expendable and they need to. She makes some really racist, comments.
I think she's the most compassionate of them, but she still grew up in this world, in this culture, and all of that. So that's why she still has those ideals. But I think the most interesting thing is Melissa, how they really made her the opposite of Rachel in the sense that like this rapport that Rachel and Marco always have, this lively debate Rachel always has with everyone, her feelings and mannerisms, like Melissa has none of that, doesn't get jokes, it's just there.
Oh yeah, that's also really interesting. I mean, it could be attributed to the fact that they just don't have time to develop her character before.
No, I think they did that specifically.
Happening. No, I agree. I agree. I think it was a very brilliant way to do this, where you don't have the ability to really flesh out a character.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic that you pointed out, is they don't have Rachel to really balance out the team. And because of that, you see, like Jake and Marco kind of conspiring against Cassie. Like their whole team is just built to crumble. And I
really like how, I mean, I mentioned it before, but I like how that it's almost implying that Rachel and Tobias are this great love. Like these people who found each other and are perfect for each other. Because even though Tobias is dating Rachel's replacement, he doesn't feel the same way. Like he's dating her, he's with her, but he talks about not being happy with her. And that's like, it just implies this more romantic vision of Rachel and Tobias that I like.
Sure, Rachel's key to the team because when all of this goes away and the team are replaced by their regular selves, Rachel appears on the scene and Melissa's replaced.
Yeah, and she's apparently Rachel just in being in her general personality and who she is. She was in a re-education camp during these events. Oh, absolutely, because this kind of society, which I just love. I wish they had spent honestly more time in this particular world and this society. Yeah, or gone back to it in another book or something. That would have been great.
But this is such an interesting kind of universe that they're stuck in here, and they don't really become awakened to it until the Drode shows up. And the first time I read this book, like I said, I hadn't read the book where the Drode's introduced, and this guy, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know his personality. I didn't know what he looked like. I couldn't imagine him. Honestly, I still can't imagine him because the description they give of him is just stupid.
A mix between a lizard and a prune or something?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he doesn't look intimidating, really, and I imagine my own little cartoony kind of version of him.
Yeah, it does a good job of, like, rehashing his relationship with Jake, though, and Krayak. I mean, it does, like, a little blurb of, oh, Jake, you're the most hated by Krayak because of this, blah, blah, blah,
Well, I like how he calls Rachel his favorite Animorph.
Yeah, that's nice.
And, honestly, I will say, I think this little passage here, this little section of him, made me kind of like him a little bit more, if for the only reason I totally pictured his personality something akin to Hades from Disney's animated Hercules. Like that kind of guy,
I pictured him as the classic little funny sidekick, except evil.
Sure, like the evil minion. Just kind of like more like the fast talking, wisecracking kind of sort. Done like that, I think the Drode could be likable.
I picture him being voiced by Alan Tudyk in the live action version.
There you go. Whatever makes the Drode likable. Hey, hashtag let's make the Drode great again.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we get snapped back to reality.
There goes gravity. Oh, there goes gravity.
And the droids, they're just laughing at the Nazi universe that Visor 4 had created, and kind of fills them. He acts as the Chi in this episode, and he fills them in on what's been going on and why this happened, and gives them the opportunity to fix it. Which, of course, that's Visor 4 went back in time, changed history, and made the Earth more susceptible to Yeerk invasion. He says they're months away from a full-fledged invasion in the alternate universe. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this shitty world that they're stuck in is really not helping to that. I mean, they've got, 2-3 TV channels, no access to books. Everything is... It's just a horrible society that they've been stuck with here.
Yeah, and the choice they're given by the droid is saying that, Krayak and Elemis don't want some human or some lower life form, Yeerk, running around the universe with the time matrix. Even though it won't hurt them in any way, it's still too powerful of a chess piece in this game that they're playing. So it gives them the option to go back in time and fix it, but for the price of one of their lives, which they all kind of clue in that's probably going to be Jake. And,
not all of them necessarily. Rachel seems pretty oblivious to it. In fact, I have reason to believe that Rachel probably thinks she's the one who will die, and probably planned to be the one to die for the team.
Or knowing Rachel's personality, she might have just been not even thinking about it. Like, whatever, we got to do this no matter what. We're ready to go. But no, it leads to an interesting fight between her and Rachel and Marco. In that Marco is kind of being aloof and acting like he always does, saying, I don't want to go. Let's go home and watch TV. Blah blah blah. And
he has to be the voice of opposition to this suicide mission, as he thinks it is.
Which he always is, and he always has been before. But it's more interesting here because we get the perspective of Cassie, who is sharing looks with Marco and kind of reading him a little better than we have in the past, and gotten a more introspective look at him. And Marco, just like all the past times, he's not wanting to go on missions. He's not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about his life. He's thinking about his family and friends. And in this case, it's Jake. And he knows Jake will be the price they pay. And he's literally fighting for the life of his best friend by saying they don't want to go on this mission.
Exactly. But, unfortunately, they're in these kind of situations where they absolutely have to. Either choice, honestly, is bad. They can stick with the horrible reality that Visor 4 is creating, or they can actually attempt to try and stop him, and sure, one of them will die.
Which none of them really. I mean, Marco is opposed to it for that reason, but even Cassie, who feels the same way as Marco, is standing against it. She cannot own a slave. That is not who she wants to be. It's not what planet she wants Earth to be. They have to do something.
Exactly. And, they try to bring up more of these morality kind of decisions later on once they gain control of the time matrix and discuss whether or not they should allow certain historical events to happen, like the Holocaust and the Titanic. I'm sure they wanted to go back and save the Titanic.
That would have been great. I want to read that book. Seriously. Doctor Who did it. Why not Animorphs?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? So, moving on.
So they agree, and then Rachel, I like her little, no, but you got to give us time. I got to go pack, I got to whatever, and boom, they're immediately in a medieval wasteland.
Yeah, this is kind of a cool start to the adventure, I thought, because it's like these two little teenage girls, Cassie and Rachel, they just appear in, it's France in 1415, we find out. And they're confronted by, all these French knights on horseback and in armor and stuff, like real armor. And these are two little, almost half-naked girls out, and it's a rainstorm, so it's dumping water on them. And they've got to deal with these knights, and it just kind of harkens back to the good old days when the themes of these books were, let's see how much we could torment these kids,
Yeah, and I mean them trying to plead with a French knight on whether they're witches or not, and then definitely being English, which is already would have gotten them killed. It's just a fun little way to start off the time travel. And then, of course, Rachel... I think this is smart. I thought about this little instance of what they would have actually done, what would have been their best chance of survival if they hadn't been saved. And I think Rachel's right. I think just desperately trying to morph to something to defend themselves is the only way they would have gotten out of this. So
sure, I always prefer the old bug morph and escape tactic.
Yeah, but if they
well.
were going smaller and in a running position, like when she gets bigger into elephant, at least she can start fighting before the morph is done. If they're going smaller, they'd have to complete the whole morph before they could really get away, and by that time, these knights probably would have just killed them.
Whatever, dude. They can run. It's dark at night. They can flee on foot, and they're shrinking the whole time. It's got benefits.
Yeah, they'd be morphing and like falling over into the mud, and yeah, whatever.
The important thing is that this book uses the adjective skanky to describe several of the soldiers.
Yeah, I like that they're realistic with the time travel. It's not, they immediately talking about the hygiene of people back in time, which is accurate and terrifying.
Yeah, it's cool. I wrote in my notes that Marco sneaks in a history lesson here as they're like kind of scouring the countryside, just looking for something, and that's what this book really is. It is a very good sort of history lesson. Poised as a sci-fi adventure.
if the book series was written to kind of... obviously, the book series wasn't written to educate us on animals. Katherine has said that multiple times. But you do learn a lot about animals within the entertainment of the series. And I think in this book specifically, you learn a lot about history without them meaning to teach you directly.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the point that it's not meant to teach you about the animal specifically, but you do learn about it. I mean, that's the difference between the Animorphs and, like, the wild krats.
The wild krats? I don't know what that is.
You don't. That's because you don't have children in your life. It's a I don't know what, like a kindergarten age show for kids. It's these animal experts, the Krat brothers. I don't know what their names are. It's a cartoon show for kids where they have this special battle armor that gives them different various animal abilities.
It sounds like a ripoff of Animorphs.
It very much feels like a successor to it, except that it is one specifically aimed at that very, very young, like 5 to maybe 7, 8 market. And no, younger than that, 3-year-olds maybe. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that stupid show aside.
Yeah, what were we talking about?
we were just, they got to France, and Cassie and Rachel are kind of dealing with these knights, and Jake and Marco and Axe and Tobias all come in and save the day. Yeah, we get a little battle scene. It's pretty interesting because they've, as far as I know, haven't fought actual knights in armor at any point. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, and what they realize is that the only way they can get out of this, the only way they can successfully complete this mission is that they need to find Visor 4, and they don't really know how they're going to do that. They don't really have a battle plan here, but they just do what they... It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple to figure it out. Take to the skies. Yeah, well, they take to the skies, and they figure out that Visor 4 is going to be the only one who looks modern. He had white teeth, no lice. You should be able to pick him out of a crowd. Right, and it's always... I assumed he had all these badass powers, but you got to remember that he's just a normal human controller for the most part. And you know what? He's the former Visor 4. He's ex-Visor 4. So he's just like your standard person, really. There's nothing special about this guy. Yeah, exactly. Other than the fact that he looks like a slightly modern person. Oh, yeah. But... you don't know where you are. I was looking something up real quick. Anyway, I was just making sure that this actually took place in France. Yeah, it does. The coolest part about this French Battle of Agincourt scene is when the battle actually starts, and for some reason the team is in the middle of it. And they're trying to just travel, and then a couple of them go lower and to look for Visor 4 specifically, and they don't see both armies at once. They see the French army, and then eventually see the English army and realize that they're in the middle of it, and the battle's literally about to start. And that starts with the main the way that this book really stands out from a lot of the other ones is how extreme and gory it is at some points and how hurt they get throughout this book.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's almost like Game of Thrones level violence and action here in this scene.
They talk a lot about how it's almost like if the experiment is touching on vegetarianism and and how badly we treat animals, this book kind of wanted to show off how horrifying.
Oh yeah, this is absolutely about the horrors of war and specifically
war.
Human killing, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so Visor 4, they kind of figure out, they don't know why, they don't really know what battle they're in, but they figure out that Visor 4 is an archer, just from finding a hygienic human and figuring out what he looks like. And they see
he was the only archer that sucked.
Yeah, and he is specifically, for some reason, aiming at the English king, Henry VIII. Don't know why, don't know.
I thought it was a French king. I wrote in my notes it was a French king.
I know you did. I tried to correct it without bringing it up, but instead you brought it up.
Nope, I got to call you out on this. I don't know why I wrote French king.
Yeah, you're calling yourself out. But no, it's Henry VIII. It's Henry VIII. It's what Shakespeare wrote the play on, and that's a big plot point in this book.
Yeah, okay, now that makes more sense.
Yeah, so
I just wrote French for some damn reason.
Because they're in France, and you're like, well, there's French people around. It's whatever. But no, so he's trying to kill the French or the English.
Oh yeah, no, I do want to reference my notes because I actually put down he's trying to kill him with a bow instead of being smart and having brought a gun.
Well, you don't know if you can take objects with the time matrix. It could be like the Animorphs, where like the only thing to get through is like tight-fitting clothing. As far as we know,
that doesn't seem to be the case. It's not mentioned.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, he didn't bring a gun. Whatever. I figured he thought he'd find stuff or
a Dracon beam. Shit, man.
Or he, maybe
equip yourself before you set out on a quest.
Electronics or complex mechanics might not be able to get through, or get through unscathed and still work.
I think Elfangor exploited the hell out of that time matrix, and somebody else could manage to sneak a gun through. Guns get past the TSA. They can get past the time matrix.
Visor 4 is not as Yurk is not as imaginative and creative as an Andalite, so I think that's why he didn't think it through. You know
what this battle scene gave us? The really cool Tobias catching an arrow in midair scene.
Oh, that was awesome. And he did a corkscrew to catch it. So he was like upside down when he caught it. That's awesome.
It was very cinematic.
I think it even says the Animorphs cheered when it happened.
And fireworks went off, even though they weren't time era appropriate.
Both sides stopped fighting and looked up in the air in awe, and started clapping.
I imagine they'd worship that hawk as god.
Yeah, it's not that old. It's medieval times. They're not like a tribe of some people.
They would if Tobias flew over there and started thought-speaking to him.
No, it was medieval times, so obviously they would have inundated that hawk into their current religions. That's how that would have worked. Anyway, so he's after Henry VIII, fails miserably thanks to the Animorphs, and everyone's pretty beat up. They stopped the battle at one point.
Pretty beat up. They're all dying.
Yeah, and
they would be dead.
They're running around as Hork-Bajir, definitely starting some supernatural beliefs in some people, thinking that they're devils. And
it's kind of funny, yeah. We do get to see the return of the Hork-Bajir morph with Tobias, and he's riding on Jake as a horse, which is always great to see when they use each other as mounts.
Yeah, and
I'm a big fan of elephant squirrel myself.
Yeah, and the Animorphs are so optimistic; they think they're going to catch him. Right now, it's going to end in, old-timey medieval Europe. It's just not going to be the case. And the cool thing is, we didn't mention it, we didn't go into it, but leading into this, a big thing that happened between Marco and Cassie is promising each other that Krayak will not have Jake. They're going to stop this. So they really think they're going to be able to kill Visor 4, or at least stop him before he starts anything. And we can see that definitely doesn't happen.
No, yeah, exactly. But, that was a good, really strong moment. Almost jerked a few tears from the old from me.
Yeah, exactly. And so they lead this chase with Wizard 4. It leads into this church, and he's obviously hidden the time matrix in there. None of them even know what the time matrix looks like, so they don't really know what they're looking for. They just know they have to stay with him. And while they're like breaking down the door of the church and fighting a mob that thinks Tobias is the devil holding a pitchfork, they instantly disappear, and we find ourselves in colonial times with Marco and Jake.
Yeah, so whenever XV4 activates the time matrix and time jumps, the Animorphs, like the Drode mentioned, he's kind of retuned their bodies in such a way that they'll follow the time matrix wherever it goes. And some other ways that will come to light here in a little bit.
Yeah. And so they follow along, but they get separated. I never really understood I guess it's kind of like a whiplash effect, so they would all get scattered a little bit, but it gets them in the vicinity of the time matrix, but they generally don't come together. So Jake shows up alone and cold and freezing or whatever. Marco finds him first, and you find out that, we're on the bank of the Delaware, and George Washington is crossing in the famous
Yeah, exactly.
scene. Yeah, and Marco has his boots on, which is awesome.
They did manage to acquire some clothing here in this case, yeah. And
rags.
They figure immediately upon seeing George Washington that, okay, X-Visor 4 is here, obviously, to do something to disrupt, probably kill George Washington. That's what they think. And so they just kind of follow him and sort of protect him and try to relocate the rest of their team.
Yeah, and when they're crossing the river itself, they figure out it is the crossing of the Delaware. They don't really know the importance, other than everybody's talking about Hessians, so they figure that this is the surprise on the Hessians of him crossing the Delaware. And, Cassie shows up and morphs to Dolphin, which is just useless for protecting George Washington.
That's right.
Axe and Tobias are on the other bank that they're crossing over to, and they've already told Jake and Marco that there's a bunch of troops over here. This is, advanced party or something. So it seems like everything's going all right. They just have to get across and then try to protect George Washington as much as possible before they find out, and we, the reader, finds out that this is going to be one of the most brutal scenes in an Animorphs book ever written.
Oh, it's excellent.
It's
because of how quickly it sneaks up on you and surprises you. And during the crossing of the Delaware, just as predicted, I would say, Jake is shot dead. And it's one of the most shocking and pretty cool scenes in an Animorphs book, I think.
Yeah, and the way it's written, they meet that line of, if this kid's book, so you can't talk super about the gore, but Marco says that he sees a hole in Jake's forehead, and then the back of Jake's forehead is just gone, which, munitions of the time would have done that pretty easily. So,
yeah,
a mullet bullet would just go in and then explode in the back of your body. So, really, really gruesome way to take Jake out immediately. And Marco's freaking out, trying to hold on to his body. The other people in the boat are trying to shove it over the water. Cassie doesn't even know what happens until Marco, or until one of them yell at her to try to find the body. I think Rachel or someone.
Yeah, so she's in dolphin morph, floating around trying to find Jake's corpse, which she does, but it doesn't really matter. Because the next time jump happens before. And then,
before we get to that, great scene here. Something that haunts Axe, I believe, past this book. I think it's brought up again. I don't know for sure, but basically, Rachel takes command of the situation, which is both strange and going to happen more than once after this. With Jake out of the way, she kind of just starts yelling at Axe to do something, and Axe is just this confused Andalite kid, not even knowing where he is in Earth's history, which he knows nothing about. And he's just, there's soldiers over there, and they're firing at his friends, and he's already scared. And Rachel just starts yelling at him to do something, and kill the troops that are firing. That would do anything to stop anything. But he starts running along their lines and knocking a bunch of soldiers out until he gets to the officer. And then it says that, it implies, and then later it says that he killed this officer, decapitated him. Before the next time jump.
This is another great Axe scene, and it's the first time he's taken human life, right?
Yeah, it's not a controller. I'm sure he's killed other controllers before, but never just a human who he doesn't know what side of history he's on or why he should be a bad guy or anything. He's just,
exactly. Yeah.
And plus, I think Axe's military career is important in this too because he assassinated an officer in an army, which he references that his military training and stuff several times when talking about it, and I think that's important to him that he just killed this random officer. It's probably not how Andalites fight wars,
Right, yeah. And so while Axe is on his little human murder spree, Cassie's freaking out in the water looking for Jake's body. And, Marco is also freaking out, and he's actually in the boat. But again, it seems like here's another failure for the team, and they don't even really get time to think about it because they're instantly teleported to the next place.
Before they do get teleported, though, they do see George Washington get hit. So this is the death of George Washington as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's even more of a failure. Messes up the whole time stream.
They don't know why they were at the Battle of Agincourt or even what that battle was, but they get how big of an impact that is. George Washington dying crossing the Delaware. That's a big blow to America.
Exactly. I think it was wise probably to save the more well-known historical event for the second place they travel to, and have that first one to just pick a random battle in time, show the brutality of human warfare, especially that old school like arrows, sword and shield kind of.
Yeah.
Where you got to get all up close and personal and like stab the people. That's so brutal.
We already saw dinosaurs, so it makes sense that when they're time traveling now, they're seeing more of human history and classic, knights and all of that. So that's pretty cool.
Exactly, and the next scene would I would say go further to expand that, because now you got like the swashbuckling seafaring era where they're on a ship.
Yeah, the Battle of Trafalgar is a big one. Tons and tons of the largest ships ever built. Wooden sailing ships just crashing into each other and battling. Just a humongous battle at sea, naval battle. And they don't really know where they're at again, but, Jake just died, and it's really messy. This is the scene where they don't really care. They're very blinded by their grief and anger. Cassie really messed up, goes off by herself, and abandons Rachel and everyone else to just whatever.
She gives in to being the dolphin for a while.
Yeah, she just wants to be happy, and she just goes off and does her own thing. And Marco and Rachel are just dedicated to getting revenge on Visitor 4 and going after him.
Exactly. So even though they're on this little, sailing vessel, this ship at sea, Marco goes guerrilla right there below deck and winds up chasing the ex-Visitor across deck.
Axe is pretty much trapped this whole book in that ship. He gets knocked out or something. It doesn't really go into what happened to him, but he wasn't part of the main flight of Visitor 4. But no. Marco goes after him. Rachel shows up at some point, and while Visitor 4 is running up the mast and the sails,
he's climbing the ropes, and
Marco,
Rachel,
unlike classic Hollywood movies, Marco and Gorilla Morph can't climb, very well.
Yeah, I like that they stuck with that. But this also gave Rachel a reason to try out the chimp morph that we just got in the sickness, and it's nice to see returning so quickly.
Which chimps can... I can see why Visitor 3 gets so scared here, because chimps are strong, and they can be scary.
Yeah, 100%. It's still an effective battle morph as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially for fighting a lowly human.
But, we do get also another scene of Rachel in her morphing outfit on a deck of young and old men who haven't seen a girl probably in months and months and months. Oh,
exactly. She's lucky the scene worked out the way it did.
Yeah, if they were in the middle of battle, that could have gone poorly for her. But anyway, so they're in this big fight. They're going. Rachel's running up the mast to catch Visitor 4. And I guess he hit the time matrix and, he climbs back down. But,
dude, there's yeah.
Yeah, basically, they're in the middle of this battle. Ships are crashing into each other. Their ship is crashing into another ship. Cannonballs and musket fire and small cannons are firing left and right. And in another incredibly brutal scene, Rachel gets just cut in half by a cannonball.
It's terrific. It comes out of nowhere. And it's just as shocking as Jake dying. And now is the point where you're like, oh my God, 2 Animorphs have died. Maybe more.
It talks about like the last thing she sees as her head falls is most of her body and Visitor just laughing at her. And then she blacks out and dies. It's just very brutally written.
Oh, yeah. Well, they don't skimp on the details here of brutality.
Thanks, Michael Grant.
Sure. You can give the props to him for that. Like you said, after she's blown up and the threat's kind of gone, X-Visitor manages to get away once again, and he blows up the entire ship that they're on, which theoretically should kill Marco and Axe as well.
Which I don't know the Battle of Trafalgar enough to know. It led to the English surrendering to Napoleon, which obviously in real history, Napoleon surrendered. But I don't know why this one ship was important enough to do that. I guess it could have been the flagship or the admiral ship or something. But I don't know that battle well enough to name anyone but Napoleon. So,
right. Well, let's just assume.
A lot of this history has to do with English versus France. I just want to point that out. A lot of human history has been determined by France and English hating each other.
That's true. Yeah, that's the best way to screw up America if you wanted to in the past.
Well, how many of our wars were based around our allies in France or our allies in England eventually, and it definitely is.
And you know what? I got to say that even Katherine herself has admitted to getting kind of confused with the timeline and the story while she was writing this.
Which it makes sense. I think she wanted to write these certain events and hit on some certain time instances, and then it must have been a confusing outline. That's for sure.
Well, I just imagined that they had to do a lot of fun research for writing this one, specifically about, we want to have the Animorphs versus Knights. What time period are we looking at? What's a good place to put them? Okay, we want to do Animorphs at the high seas. What time do we do that? Yeah.
And they go in depth. They must have done the research because they go into like how to load a cannon and other things and how these battles went as far as like archers shooting first or these cannons shooting first and then these smaller swivel cannons shooting. And then, they know these battles well from whatever research they did, which is really cool and adds to the learning aspect of it.
Yeah, I told you. It's like a history lesson.
Yeah. But the ship blows up and they're pulled once more into the past, back to the future.
You're following Tobias for this next jump because he thinks everybody's dead pretty much. And he just sort of randomly finds himself in a more modern time frame, the 1930s. At Princeton University is the campus, and he's able to snatch some clothes from an open window pretty quickly, luckily.
Yeah, and being Tobias, he's in the air looking for everybody, and the first person he spots is a lone dolphin in an alleyway.
Did you say in the air? He wasn't in the air at the moment. He was in human morph.
Oh, I thought after he gets to the clothes, I thought he just... No, that makes sense.
What?
Yeah. He flew in his new clothes as a bird.
And then he found Cassie and started telling people, don't look here, this is a dolphin.
No. But I thought this was a really cool scene. He finds Cassie. He's trying to get her to morph out, and she does. And then we see how... it's possible this scene would have played out similar.
Now, I gotta imagine a magically appearing dolphin in the middle of a college campus. They don't really mention a time frame, I don't think. I assume day, which would seem to suggest that it should have been really crowded, but yet they're only seen by one person.
No, but they're in like an alleyway, so that's why.
There's always a convenient alleyway. If you're ever stuck writing something, just make it take place in an alleyway.
I'll talk about the scene, why it's interesting, which is when Cassie's demorphed. And
yeah, guy's racist.
Yeah, and then this southern guy comes up, and that's what I was saying. Is like this scene could have played out incredibly similar, even if Visitor 4 hadn't messed with the past already. I'm sure this is 1930s. People were still incredibly racist, and as they still are today.
Yeah, I was going to say this isn't much of a change, really.
but back then, even more so. We deal with a lot of problematic areas in our culture today, but even 10, 20 years ago, it was multiple times worse. And you think back to the 1930s, it was just despondent. So.
Sure. And, this book gives us another very infrequently, or I should say rarely used morph. And I think that's what this is doing, is just giving us an opportunity to check out all these old morphs we haven't seen, because Cassie ends up going polar bear to scare this racist guy off after being enraged by him. And,
clever.
Of course, feeling all the guilt and everything from Jake's death. She just doesn't care at this moment.
She finds out about Rachel, too, before this. So that probably led to it, and her feeling guilty and being missing. Not only, like, Jake died, but then she also didn't do anything, and Rachel died as well. So that's on her watch.
Right. And she's, has every right to freak out about it. And the timeline's already so screwed up. Showing one dude a girl turning into a polar bear is probably not going to change much in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. But they figure out after dealing with these guys is that, questioning the racist guy, that it's something to do with Einstein being there, him not being there. He should be at Princeton University in the 1930s, but instead he's back in Germany because he never fled. Germany for fear of persecution. So, he's not in the right place to aid, quote-unquote, America in their fight in the war.
Yeah, but more importantly, before they do that, this is the moment where the team kind of comes back together and realizes that everyone except for Jake is back to life.
Yeah, that's a big one, because they're talking about Rachel and kind of remembering her for a moment, and then she walks up and starts talking.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic Rachel.
And, they speculate that perhaps, as per Elemist and Crayak Steel, he might have also altered their bodies so that they could not die, and Jake was the only one who could.
Yeah, which the Droid mentions when he's giving him Crayak's plan and their agreement and everything. He mentions that they would be time buffered, in the sense that they wouldn't be affected by the events of time travel, which is good, but he never says that would go to the extent of them not being able to die. So, good to know that.
Yeah, exactly, and it also fixes a key problem with this book, which is that when your main characters literally can't die, that's really heavy plot armor, and I guess saving it for a reveal for when you're 3/4 of the way through the book is probably a good idea than giving it to the readers from the get-go.
Although I think they could have done something similar to The Sickness, which would have been interesting, is since we're dealing with time travel here and they take the Back to the Future time travel approach, you could have had them dying in each, like somebody dying in each time frame, and it getting down to the wire if there only be one or two of them left to fix this. And then once they fixed it, everybody's back. They didn't have to give them this plot armor. It could have been actually a really more tense. Well,
it could have been, but then they would have also only got the opportunity to focus on a core set of characters till eventually there's only the one left. So who gets the honor?
Megamorphs book. Yeah.
Who gets the honor? Is this gonna be a book about Marco saving the whole team? I want to read that one.
I bet that was the original idea, and then they thought, hey, these Megamorphs books, they're interesting because we jump around to all the perspectives, so you would have lost that in a Megamorphs book where they died.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. When the main characters can't die, my feelings change drastically for the plot, because it just changes things substantially.
Although I think that could be boring and written by some other authors, I think it is interesting in this one that they use death at certain points throughout the rest of the book to, do certain things or affect things. So they made it interesting.
Well, I mean, and they obviously don't want to die, even knowing that they can't, because it's still a very scary concept, and they don't want to test it out.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't. They just carry on as usual. It's the only thing they can do when they're in these bad situations. Just go to the end of the mission and do the best you can to succeed.
And I think it's it's interesting how they go forward after this, and once you find out that Einstein's not here and that Visitor 4 doesn't know exactly how time is unraveling, and I think maybe this is where the authors got confused as well, we get a bunch of time jumps that are more like trying to lose the Animorphs or trying to shake them off his trail, or at least like give him more time when he goes where he really wants to after this. And it's great because we see a bunch of random shots of things, and then they find themselves, or at least Marco finds himself, in a D-Day boat heading to Normandy's shore, which is just about the worst place to possibly show up randomly.
Yeah. Oh, wait. There's one thing I wanted to call attention to back when they're figuring out the whole Einstein plot, because there's a way that it's introduced that is just screams of coincidence to wrap things up quickly. It's one of those situations where somebody says something and then another character goes, "Wait a minute, that leads me to think all of this stuff." Cassie's laying everything out on the line. She says, "I may have an idea," Cassie said. "Maybe Visitor 4 has outsmarted himself. He's here expecting something, right? But maybe whatever it was supposed to be has been altered by what he's already done. He changed the past, so whatever was supposed to happen here and now isn't happening." "My head is going to explode," Marco said. "You need to be Einstein to figure this." "Einstein?" Friedman interrupted. "You mean Albert Einstein, the German physicist?" And then that's seriously how they're brought into this whole, Einstein plot.
It's definitely, it was a little rushed on getting to that point.
But there's really, realistically, I mean, that's the easiest way to introduce that piece of information. It's dumb, but it's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, it is.
Just wanted to call it out.
They could have, if they wanted to spend a little more time in Princeton, they could have found Visitor 4 and heard him yelling at the dean about Einstein.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That could have been a different scene. But, time constraints, creativity, reasons, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what it had to be. So
we go to Normandy now?
Yeah, they're time skipping all the way to Normandy, which is another awesome, I imagine this, even live action, this would be a fucking sweet scene. You got these boats full of soldiers, right, scared to death, and then, kids are just sitting in the mix.
Yeah. Well, we've seen how horrible this isn't on live action through Saving Private Ryan, the opening scene, and how horrifying that invasion was. I mean, it was literally throwing bodies at the beach until they got past the guns. So it's just a horrifying aspect of World War II.
And again, that really goes to show the worst of humanity's wars and killing, and I think they picked some pretty brilliant little snippets there to really demonstrate that.
Yeah, and they get onto the beach, they kind of get past it, and it's just really messing with them, seeing this one scene of humanity's worst moments. And they find a way past it, though, and they kind of just figure they have to find Visitor 4, just have to get this over with finally. He put a buffer here to try to get a little more time, so this is obviously...
He's got his tank squad heading towards the beach. This whole ending conflict here just becomes wrestling with tanks, basically.
Yeah, and the whole point of Normandy is that it was one of many possible invasions on that day, and it was a matter of the Nazis knowing which invasion was the real invasion. So Visitor 4's plan here was to inform them that, hey, Normandy, that's where they're really coming. So get all your troops down there. So this whole line of tanks are coming. You see Visitor with the head Nazis or whatever in a jeep following the tanks, and they kind of split up right here to hit multiple fronts. Rachel and Axe. Yes, maybe Rachel and Axe are gonna go after the tanks.
I don't know what part you're about to describe.
Marco and Tobias and Cassie go after Visitor 4, right? That's how they split up.
Yeah, they some of them decide that it's worth their while to try and figure out how, as birds, they can carry grenades to stop the tanks.
Yeah, they figure out they're going through a narrow path.
It seemed like they were really stretching for content here, to be honest.
Yeah, if we can destroy one tank, then it'll stop the rest. And I don't think that's how the France countryside really works, but, whatever. But anyway, a lot of this book takes place in France. That's what we really take away from this review.
Exactly. Birds are fully capable of pulling pins out of hand grenades and dropping them inside of tanks. That's what we need to figure out, is how to weaponize just birds.
I think we've done that. I think that actually happened in World War II. Not this way specifically. I think we strapped bombs to them and threw them in tanks or something.
Oh, I don't doubt it. I know how awesome those Mongolian falconers are.
Yeah, exactly. But point of this whole crazy battle, I do think this for World War II, I think they could have done something more interesting than this. I mean, the Normandy part is amazing, but once they get past it, it's just kind of all over the place a little bit.
Then they're just standing above the battlefield, watching the destruction. There's always this safe place within the battlefield that the main characters can occupy where they're not affected by anything, but they can sit there and be like, the battle's going, the tanks are over there, the bad guy's over there, how are we going to wrap this up?
But it leads to a confrontation with Visser 4. They find out that Visser 4 did not go over well with the leaders of the Nazi party, quote-unquote Nazi party, and that he's been handcuffed and he's a prisoner of them. And they have the time matrix right there on the back of one of the Jeeps or in a truck or something. Yeah,
and it becomes a standard car chase. The end.
And so Cassie and Tobias are in morph. Tobias in a Hork-Bajir morph again, and then Cassie's in her wolf morph. And they're trying to just take Visser 4 and get him. And they kind of have the showdown with the German soldiers who get out of their car and are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Who are you? What are you? Blah, blah, blah. And kind of seems like it's going to work itself out at first. Maybe they can talk their way out of it or explain the situation almost. It's kind of really weird that they find, they have a translator or something and they're talking to him. And then to ruin everything, just like he always has, Hitler shows up. Tobias freaks out, grabs him. He's just a driver in this universe.
Right, he's like any other dude, and they make a huge deal about finding him, and we have to punish him. We got to kill him right now. It's Hitler. Well, it's not the Hitler we know. He didn't do those things.
Yeah, and they start noticing that all the symbols and the, on both sides, they're not, symbols they recognize. This maybe isn't Nazis.
They mentioned several times they can't call them American troops because they don't know, what they are. Not to mention, France is allied with Germany in this reality, which is crazy. I mean, the entire point of France in World War II was that it was captured and we kind of went back after it. That's what a big part of Normandy was. So the fact that France and Germany are allies, without being taken over by them, is crazy and just makes you know that history is nowhere close to where it is in our reality. So that confuses them. But is it the explosion from Rachel and Axe that makes Tobias kill Hitler? I don't know what it is.
Something surprises them, and Tobias accidentally kills Hitler. And,
whoops! I killed the Hitler.
Yeah, and
killed Hitler.
And the whole convoy starts messing up, and it's all a disaster. And a tank flips over and crushes Visser 4's legs.
It basically it all wraps up quite disastrously and quickly.
Disastrously.
No, disastrously, because there's a lot of things that go wrong quickly, and it just kind of works out well for the good guys.
There you go.
I mean, ex-Visser 4, he gets kind of a crappy death, so to speak, with... he basically has to abandon his host body, and he doesn't even manage to get away.
He doesn't even really have, an ending speech or anything. He sees that his host body is dying, and crushed from the legs down, and just crawls out, and then Marco picks him up and throws him in a tank.
Well, no, I like that Marco actually offered him to the other members of the team first. It was like, does anybody want to do this deed of disposing him? And each of them were kind of like, I'm done.
Yeah, I've already got my
so Marco was like, well, God, screw it. Okay, fine. And he just threw him in the tank, which was on fire. He's not getting out of that alive.
Yeah, and now they're stopped for a moment. No one's shooting at him or anything, and they're all kind of discussing. Well, like, okay, we finally killed Visitor 4. It's over. We have the time matrix. How do we fix this? And they start to talk at first about how they could go back in time here, or go back in time here, or maybe even go into the future and see if, since Visitor 4 didn't get to do all of his plans, maybe the future's not as bad as what we saw. Maybe it's better. There's no Holocaust. You know, there's some high points there.
Sure,
and,
they have a whole discussion on, you know, the ability to use the time matrix to fix things, so to speak.
Which is great. And I like that when they bring up the reasonable point of, like, we are too dumb to mess with history. Who are we to try to fix things? Rachel brings up, well, that's what we do every day. Every single day we affect the future. So why not go back in the time and do it just in, you know, a different way? I thought that was an interesting point that I don't think a book series like this would normally bring up. So that's pretty cool to have the other perspective.
They do
even though they have the crazed person say it, it's still a good point.
They do try to have a little debate on time travel here, and, you know, the right way to use it and such and whatnot. And I think the general consensus is, well, you should let events play out naturally, unless, you know, somebody went back in time and started screwing with things.
Yeah, but they still have to fix what's been done. They agree, like you said, they want the timeline to be like it was in their time. But how do we do that? How do we get back? Where do we go to stop this? Do we try to stop Visitor 4 from getting the time matrix? And Cassie finally, like, everybody's silent, and they kind of figure it out all together, but Cassie's the first one to say it. She's like, I guess this will be my sin. And she kneels
she's
down.
the one who has to propose the idea that she has to fix things.
And she asks the host body his name and where his parents met.
Good old John Berryman. They were so close to having it be John Everyman. You know that?
Pretty much.
It's just the most generic.
Yeah. So they I guess a scene we don't see, they figure out, or with Axe figure out the time matrix and how to use it. And well,
I think X specifically says, oh gosh, I should read it. This is a moment where we should read it.
Yeah.
It's a gosh darn Megamorphs book. We're going to read it. X says the time matrix was surprisingly simple to operate. It could be directed by Thoughtspeak command. There were no codes to break, no subtleties to grapple with. It's broken up. That's why I was confused by that one. Cassie told me the time and place and date. I morphed a human, made physical contact with the time matrix, and my friends did as well, keeping their own minds blank as possible. So it's like one of those Ghostbusters scenarios where you gotta wipe your minds.
They could since the time matrix has been shown to be able to, like, change space and time, they could have really messed up the world if, like, Marco hadn't had an Aaron thought or anything.
Sure, they could have, but because we are literally in the last, like, 5 pages of this book, we need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So they wind up in San Francisco, 1967, to this time when John Berryman's parents apparently met on this, wherever they are. It's probably a campus or something. San Francisco city streets.
Yeah, I pictured, like, one of the sloped suburban downtown areas of San Francisco, just on some corner.
Sure. Or in an alley. Convenient alley. There they find his hippie mother, and they don't really, like, do anything, to them. They don't do anything other than talk to him.
They don't even realize that it's his mother. They just go onto the corner, and then in their discussion of how to find his parents, a couple hippies come up and start being amazed by the time matrix and how it looks and how weird it is and shiny. And so they're just, they're trying to get rid of these hippies, and then everything reverts back to normal because one of those hippies was John Berryman's mom, and so she never met his father.
Right. Quite conveniently, they were in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and without even knowing it, managed to do exactly what they needed to do. Thus, wrapping up the plot of this book really quickly, because as soon as this scene is over, everyone just reappears at Cassie's barn, and Jake is there, and they're like, Jake, you're back! Everyone's back together. And the book ends quite abruptly on what I think they hoped would be a really, powerful statement, I guess. And I'll read that statement for you. In the end, it's Cassie and Jake, and they have another kiss, woo, because they're reunited and deserving of such affection here. Oh my God, he whispered. In the end, did we do it? Did we put it all back right? Did we make it right? I went and gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. No, we didn't make it right, but we put it back, Jake. Leave it at that. We put it all back. So you really, really get a sense of, even with the power of time travel, we're just stabilizing what already sucks.
Yeah, and I think from Axe's comments about human history and our wars, and just showing how graphically bloody and horrifying some of these wars were, and then that ending statement, I think it's pretty easy to say that Kay Applegate specifically was commenting on humans and that we don't deserve, to be held at some high moral standard, even if things have been fairly. You can't even say modern day is very peaceful. We're at war all the time.
No, absolutely.
So
I would even go as far as to say we are worse off now than we were in the 90s. Since the writing of this book.
I would hazard a guess that humans are not even in Kay Applegate's top 10 favorite galactic species based on this book.
Sure, probably not. So, it wraps up just like that. It's a hard-hitting book. It moves pretty quickly. It's got a lot of shocks, a lot of turns, as we discussed. And I don't know, I get the sense that we have differing kind of opinions on this one. And I'm interested in hearing your review.
You want me to go first?
You might as well. I mean, I don't know. You got more stuff you want to talk about? We're not anywhere over like an hour and a half. We could stretch this thing,
Yeah, we'll go into our reviews and then talk after. There's more to talk about. So this is a book I read a ton as a kid. I owned this one. I read it over and over. Really enjoyed the time travel and all the history stuff, and I really liked it. And I went into it reading it now thinking, oh, this is going to be easy, 5 out of 5. And I have some issues with it this time around. I mean, it's still fun, still incredibly fun. I do like the history stuff still. But it gets into some problems that I didn't realize before that I thought now I'd really like to have understood and explained. And part of that is Krayak and the Ellimist being a major part of this book and not really playing the field. I mean, I think it could have been incredibly interesting if while they're trying to fix history, Krayak and the Ellimist were actually doing things as well, affecting them, like helping them or hurting them or doing just a little more, being a more of a part of the story, just a tiny bit. I think that would have been really interesting. Otherwise, they're just 100% just a device to make this plot happen, which I think is a little shallow. And, it's I think there could have been more either places they go or, I don't know, like the time travel itself, I don't think it was super fleshed out. Like, you get to World War II, which is incredibly important, and there's so many places you could have gone in World War II that would have been amazing. And Normandy, obviously, is one of the big ones, but they lose their way after the initial beach run. That's what everybody cares about. And once they get into just the countryside of France, it's kind of meandering and trying to figure stuff out and what their actual mission is. And other than that, I really have a problem. I love time travel. I love movies about time travel. I've had so many long arguments about which time travel is correct or how things would work. And I don't care if you do your own version of time travel or you use some other fictional universe's version of time travel, as long as you world build it, as long as you set the rules and then stick to the rules. I don't think this book did that. How they traveled in the first place, back in time, without the time matrix, was that Krayak? Was that the Ellimist sending them back? Was it time itself? And then, like, how they come back after time is fixed, they just reappear in modern day, which, that slingshot rubber band effect is in place in a lot of fictional time travel, but I don't think any of that was very clear. And I personally don't like this type of time travel. It's the very Back to the Future time travel, which that works in Back to the Future because that movie is amazing, and the story and plot and the fun of it sustains that, even though, in my mind, that's the worst, most unrealistic version of time travel, which is what they employ here. And
the one timeline rule.
Yeah, exactly. And that aside, it's still a great fun book. It's still one I would go back to. It's a Megamorphs. All the Megamorphs are interesting. But surprisingly, yeah, this isn't as good as I remembered it. I had some nostalgia glasses on, and I would still read it again, but I don't think it holds up as well as some of the other ones. So, especially when we have a alternate universe time travel Megamorphs coming up, that is one of the best written books of the series, and I think we'll blow this one out of the water. So I'm going to give this 3 out of 5 fake Hitlers. That's my rating.
You totally went for the easy one there, which was the Hitler reference.
Well, I was going to go 3 out of 5. Hitler did nothing wrong, but I thought that might piss off some of our listeners.
I was quite simply just going to say alternate Hitlers or pacifist Hitler.
You're just mad I stole your Hitler. But
basically,
point is 3 out of 5. I'm actually, for me, for a Megamorphs book, for one that I read a ton as a childhood, it's on the low end of a 3 out of 5. It's like a 2.5 out of 5, but we don't do point whatever.
We don't divide our pointage here, no.
Yeah, exactly. So 3 out of 5. It's still a fun book. Should still be reread. But yeah, just not as good as I remembered it.
Okay, that really, I think, plays into your review a lot then, because I, having come from not having read this book so many times, like I said, this was my second time reading it, and the first time I remember being really put off by that very confusing opening, okay? Second time around, I loved it because I knew it was coming, and it just made more sense to me because I knew already how it was explained. And it was just a lot of fun. My biggest gripes are honestly that we don't get to spend more time in this really horrible alternate dimension with these different Animorphs, this different team. We can call them the Negamorphs, I think, is cool sounding. And it kind of sounds like Megamorphs. Interestingly enough, Axe was the same, by the way. He wasn't affected by this weird reality, really. I just wanted to point that out. So this book did a lot of things. It made me think the Drode was a little bit more interesting, if only slightly, and probably because I just had to make him more interesting in my own creativity and in my own headcanon. So I don't know if that's the same for everybody. Other than that, I mean, it was very much the problem is instantly delivered to the team, and then they just have to set out on this mission where they are going to be endlessly tormented until they inevitably finish their and complete their goal. The fact that most of the cast is invulnerable definitely loosens a couple of the things plot-wise for me. Other than that, I mean, I love the story. I love the fact that the timeline was altered without their knowledge. In that regard, they have already lost. The battle is lost. Literally, they had to have God or gods step in and say, hey, you guys, you screwed something up here really bad, and it doesn't really work out in our favor either, so we're going to give you numbskulls a little chance to screw up our little Jim Jam. So I really dug the fact that the Crayak and Ellimist, really weren't even involved. They weren't. They didn't appear in the book, and if they had, that'd have easily upped the page count by at least a good 10, 20 pages, and ultimately would it have been necessary because the main thread of the book was supposed to have been this ex-Visor 4, who, for all intents and purposes, should not be a threat at all. He only is because of what he's found. And sorry, my cat was walking on my shoulders while I was just talking there, and I had to shake him off. But the people at home probably had no idea.
Visor 3 would be pleased.
Yeah, exactly. My cat is Visor 3 in Morph, giving me lovin's. I was talking about the time travel. The time travel, like you mentioned, yeah, it's not really consistent with its rules. The fact that they're able to just hop to 1967 after having already screwed with events prior to that, many, many years prior to that, many millions if you include Megamorphs 2. The way that the timeline has been set up, changing things in that alternate world with erasing John Berryman, it shouldn't have been as plausible as any of the ideas that they came up with. So the time travel aspect is a little wonky, sure. What I did enjoy about this book, though, is that it did give us these great character moments. This was one where I felt like it really did something to change up the characters and advance their actions. It didn't restrict them to their archetypes that we've seen in past books. I think every character really received a very moving or very different sort of moment for them. And I gotta say, if I'm being honest, if you stack this up to Megamorphs 1, you stack this up to Megamorphs 2, and then there's this one, I think I had more fun reading this one than either of the first two. That first one really captured that big summer blockbuster kind of fun movie feeling, and that was enjoyable. I think we both gave that one a 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Megamorphs number 2, In the Time of Dinosaurs. Okay, if you're gonna have a problem with this one's time travel plot, there's no way that you can forgive the horrible time travel aspect of Megamorphs 2. Where the detonation of a bomb sends them back in time.
The way they time travel is a little ridiculous in Megamorphs number 2, but what they do there is the time travel that I love the most, is that things that have already happened in the past it's not that they can't be changed, it's just that's the way they happened. So what they did in the past is already our future. That's my favorite time travel. So I love Megamorphs 2 for that.
Yeah, okay, Megamorphs 2 had a much better twist, sure, I'll give you that. But, that one, it really was more of a, I don't even know how to describe that one, because it was like the kids wander around and look at dinosaurs for a little bit until they run into some crab people.
AKA the best thing in the entire world.
This book has constant action. It's got time skipping. It's got all the various elements of what makes different time frames both really cool and also really scary. I love the fact that we get to see the characters facing some challenges that are more realistic, such as when they're surrounded by knights, or they're stuck on a sailing ship. It's always good to see these more realistic situations being faced than flying wildly off into fantasy where they're like, oh no, we've got to stop the Gleep-Glorps from absorbing all of our brain juices or whatever. You know what I'm getting at with it. And I ultimately like the idea of a time chase. I think that's a very strong sci-fi cliche that's probably been done multiple sources. But I thought this was a pretty cool instance of it, even if it's very, very convenient with the time matrix. It doesn't really matter if you catch the bad guy in this era or not. If he gets away, you'll follow him to the next place. Like they kind of move it along quickly. You'd get the sense that if they were using this cliche to sustain a whole series, they'd have had to do a little bit more with it. But because of time page constraints, it gets simplified a lot. And ultimately, I think the book is best when it's not taken too seriously. There's some pretty heavy stuff with the Jake dying and the other Animorphs not being able to save him. That's probably about as heavy as this book gets, besides all the horrible, horrible ways the Earth has been altered in their alternate reality. But if I'm speaking about how much I enjoyed this book, I think it definitely ranks a 4. Before we started talking, I was going back and forth whether if it was a 4 or a 5. I couldn't settle. But I think I'm going to settle on a 4 ultimately. This gets 4 Megamorphs. How about that?
You like that word. You're a big fan of making that up.
Hashtag Megamorphs. I think they really could have come up with something more creative than Elfangor's Secret for the title of this book.
Yeah, I feel like that was a little random.
The Time Bandits. The Time Andalite Bandits. That's it.
That would have been perfect. Yeah, Elfangor's Secret's a little weak, especially with having already used Elfangor's name in one of the Megamorphs titles.
Well, I think that's kind of why they did it, because they wanted to, like the main series is the whatever it is for that particular book. The Megamorphs, they wanted to have them be Elfangor's something.
Well, then
Elfangor's Hope.
Then Megamorphs number 2 should have been Elfangor's Dinosaurs.
It should have been.
It should have been the Land Before Elfangor. Boom. Boom.
Before Elfangor. I approve of that. What is the title of the 4th Megamorphs book? Back to Before?
Back to Before, which is a very 90s cool title. It's not very modern, but it's very like retro.
I see that as a Back to the Future reference.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, I guess kind of. Either way, so is there actually? I mean, I thought there'd be more in this book to talk about, but really, I mean, it's pretty straightforward plot, and we discussed time travel a little bit, and I mean, it's probably of all of them the most throwaway Megamorphs book, because the first one actually plays into the plot a little bit. The second one is pretty throwaway too, but this one.
I can't see them mentioning this again.
Yeah,
I don't know if they ever do.
Remember that time we were in the Battle of Agincourt?
No, but I could see Marco maybe. Perhaps then the next book is a Marco book. Maybe he'll recall, that strong image of Jake getting blasted in the head with a gun.
That would be cool if there's a whole book where like the subplot was Marco can't sleep at night because he saw his best friend die horribly.
Exactly. I'm sure they'll work it into his dreams. And refreshingly, though, the next book, which I believe is... Sorry, I had to look at my bookshelf, and I still couldn't even see it. The next book is The Reunion. I don't know what number it is.
Oh, gosh. It is. Hold on, no, I got this. Keep talking.
It's 32.
Did you look in the back of your book?
No. Oh, God, why didn't I do that?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. The Sickness was number 29, so it's number 30.
It's number 30. Duh.
Yep.
We're on episode, 30.
We're on... Yeah, don't try to match those up because of all those private thought speaks we threw in
there.
It's just crazy.
Regardless, yeah, the numbering system was going to get messed up anyway because of books like this.
I'm definitely looking forward to the next Megamorphs book. I think that's easily my favorite Megamorphs book. Just an alternate start of the series. I mean,
that's the one I'm least familiar with, having read it maybe once.
It's so good, especially Tobias's storyline. Just incredible in that book.
I've been holding off for this podcast.
Yeah. So you've never read it before?
Not to my knowledge. I might have read snippets.
Let's just say
or summaries.
I don't think it's a spoiler, but one of the best things about that, you think about Tobias where he was in life, the kind of nerd he was, and how his home life was and stuff. Think about what would happen if Tobias went to a meeting of the Sharing, whether that would appeal to him or not. So it's just amazing. It's incredible.
Oh yeah, I'm fully aware of the Tobias subplot.
Oh, I didn't know if you were or not, but it's great.
I shouldn't say well aware. I'm moderately informed of this Tobias subplot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This is I think we're being more consistent now, and this is a big one. I love doing another Megamorphs episode. Just great to be in the swing of things and to be getting through the series. I mean, we're about to hit book number 30, which is out of 54 books. 54 regular books, and then the Megamorphs and the Visitor. And Chronicles.
We passed the halfway point of the series a long time ago in terms of how many more books we have left to talk about.
Yeah, so it's just exciting moving forward that we're getting through it, and we're going to hit a lot of ghost-written books that probably don't like, but I've been now to the point of starting to get excited about a lot of the ghostwritten books. I know there'll be some bad ones, but so far we've hit some great ones. So
I think as long as they manage to stick to what we know and love about the series and, not change things up too much, but expand upon what we know and love, they'll continue to hit that sweet spot of what these books should feel like until we get up to the ending where it's going to be, balls to the wall, powerful, the authors are going to take over again.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's just great. It feels good to be talking about this and consistently being a part of our lives again, and a part of yours, hopefully. I will say that some changes are coming. Some cool things are coming down the road. I think by the time that this airs, we will have launched our first Patreon page, where a good way for you to, as the fans, to interact with us and help us out, because it's, as you've seen in the past, we haven't been consistent. We haven't put out an episode every week at the same time or anything like that. We've kind of had to do it at our own pace because, Thoughtspeak don't pay the bills. And we put a lot of time into this podcast. I know you and I both, every time we put out an episode, we have to put a lot of things in our regular life aside to be able to get these things out and get them to you in a pretty high quality.
Absolutely. So, I'd like to think that we are, what would you call deserving of our ratings and reviews that we've accrued on iTunes this whole time. And the fact that, we've been around since early 2014, and we've stuck around this whole time. We've been mostly consistent. There's a couple bad years maybe, but
2015 we did not put out a lot of episodes. That's true.
We're still going at it, and the fact remains that we want to be more active at this as well. And we feel that Patreon has been a big success for a lot of people, and we are hoping that it could be kind of successful for us, at least in funding some kind of way to host our website, which is currently the biggest expenditure.
Yeah,
really.
You should go there and check it out. It's patreon.com/Thoughtspeak. That's correct?
Yep.
Yeah, patreon.com/Thoughtspeak. I think we've tried to put a little effort into it. I think our levels for patronage are pretty funny and awesome. Go there and check those out. I think you'll enjoy those. And our goals are the big one. I think our first goal is just to cover the cost, the general cost, yearly maintenance of the website, the podcast hosting, everything that we've put money into at this point off our own back, and done that gladly to be able to produce the podcast. But, we're young guys. We've got starting out families, and it would be incredibly helpful to have some people help us out with that. So the first goal is just to cover the basic costs of producing the podcast. And with that, our promise to you is that if we can reach that goal, we'll become highly consistent with our episodes. We're talking same date and time on whatever schedule we come up with. You'll have an episode waiting for you. I think we can definitely do that if we saw that people were willing to put the effort into that and the scratch.
More importantly than that is the fact that I'd like to talk about, we would like to come up with some new content as well to give to you people. And becoming a Patreon subscriber is a great way to interact with us. We can really share ideas and get a good idea of what kind of things you'd want to see from us or hear from us. We both have writer backgrounds, film training, and we'd really like to talk more on things of those matters, I think. And becoming a Patreon is just fast-tracking your way to get your opinion heard, and frankly, we appreciate it.
And I think, obviously we're just two guys, fans of the Animorphs. We've kind of been drawn into the community and interacted a lot with you guys and love the Animorphs fandom, and it keep going on. And I think with the way Scholastic is handling the series and K. Applegate, what they're doing, I think that it's really up to us to keep the fandom going and to try to revitalize the franchise into either a continuing series or maybe them taking another crack at a live action or animated series or something, and us discussing Animorphs and creating things in that scope, I think, is what will eventually get us there. And so with our stretch goals, we want to see as a community, if we can come together, we have resources, we have experience and things that we can do in that realm. We don't have the money to produce things regularly. And I think as a community, we could come together and we could make some of those things happen, even on a large scale, which I think would really turn some heads and bring Animorphs back into the conversation for a lot of these companies and people. So that's what I'd like to see. I think that'd be amazing if we could pull something off like that. I know on our end, creatively, we can do it, but at the end of the day, everything costs money. So that's where we're at.
Exactly. The main point I just want to get across is that, we're not trying to make money off it. We've never tried to make money off of this. That's why there's no ads on the site. We could very easily put ads on the site. I don't know how helpful that would be. I don't know how many people really view the site. That's another issue, is that we want a better site, a place that we can all kind of come together and, like we've talked about, discuss these things. And that realistically just can't happen without a little teeny tiny suckle on the monetary teat of our fandom. So, be cool. Help us out.
Yeah, like you said.
That's all we'll say about it.
Like you said, this will never be a moneymaker for us. This is not going to buy us a jet ski or a new TV or anything. But I think if, like I said, the community could come together and we could use this as a functioning point of putting money into us, we could improve our just our basic maintenance and our, like you said, get a brand new website that could create a new Animorphs community for everyone. I think that would be amazing. Instead of everybody just going to Reddit or one of the various forums, we could create a really good. I've created websites in the past. I've created some large websites, and I think we could do something special for Animorphs, kind of a hub for everybody to come to and conversate on the various aspects of the universe and what the book series is doing or how it's affected them. And like I said, further than that, we have real life. We're both writers. We work we're trained in the film industry. We have resources. I have crew hookups. We produce content regularly on the side. I think to do something in the Animorphs universe would be amazing, and I think we could produce something really good. I think it would really blow everybody away. So that's the long-term goal. Who knows if that'll happen or not? It's up to you guys, but I'm excited about the prospect of doing some new things and making Thoughtspeak even bigger and more important.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get that point across that, we love doing this and we'd love to keep on doing it. The only problem we're running into is life. Life throws things at you you're not expecting. And a little reassurance that, we can always have the site up and going and that's all we need. Really.
And I think you guys have stuck with us. You deserve a better Thoughtspeak. And I think we can give that to you if it became possible to do that on a more regular basis and at a higher quality. So just, check out the page, patreon.com/Thoughtspeak, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm excited about the possibilities.
I'd like to think that we'll be able to offer Patreon subscribers some substantial rewards, like perhaps early access to episodes and extra content that we put out. I would love to record more of the private Thoughtspeak episodes, except maybe taking it in a different route, and do user-submitted topics for each private Thoughtspeak episode.
That's
or something
idea.
of the such.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool to have Patreon subscribers dictate our episode topic for those. We can do a lot of interesting things. Yeah, check it out. That's what we'd love to say. Thank you all so much for listening to our review of Megamorphs number 3, Elfangor's Secret. I sure had a lot of fun here today, Coleman, didn't you?
I had so much fun.
It's hard to judge whether or not I would have had more fun if we had our third host here. I can't say one way or another. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say it was a good time, regardless.
I mean, you can't go wrong. We've been doing this a while, and we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't enjoy it. So, other people come and go, Mitch, but it's you and me in the long haul.
Exactly. Hey, one more quick thing. that Patreon thing, it just adds a level of authenticity to a project, right? I mean, there's a lot of big names out there and companies that are using this kind of thing, and you just get this air of authenticity and I don't even know.
Professionalism.
Yeah, I guess that's it. That's the word. I was trying to think of a bigger one. I'm searching my vernacular here for the biggest words possible to make myself look smart. Anyway, I've gone on talking way too long. I'd like to get more guest hosts here and there in the future, is what I'm trying to say. And with a Patreon, that gives us a little bit of credibility to invite some higher profile guests rather than, let's say, Nate from down the block or or our wives.
I will say this. I can't make a promise this early in the game, but we've gotten Michael Grant to come on the show, and our conversations with him that weren't recorded, I would say, could lead to exciting, really big guests in the Animorphs universe as far as the people behind the scenes, if you catch my drift. So, I mean,
sure.
Something like Patreon and updating our website and doing those things, that could make this series, make this podcast go beyond the 54 main books and whatever else, in some interviews, some exclusive content, and maybe really bring about the conversation to the people who actually own the series and own the rights to it. Have us asking them directly, what are we doing next? What are Jake and Cassie and Marco, where are they going next? What are their continuing adventures? So if you want that from us, if you want us to try to be the ambassadors of that nature, I think Patreon is definitely one way to go.
I think we can do it. I think we have what it takes. We just need a little help from our friends.
Well, that'll wrap up Megamorphs number 3 and our declaration of the future. I've been Coleman.
I have been Mitchell, and we are looking forward to the next time you tune in for our review of the next Animorphs book. Peace out.